Hey guys, Nathan Duck River Honey, and today I want to talk about some of the successes and failures, the struggles and hardships that I had during the 2022 beekeeping season. So there's a quote that I really do like. It says that a goal that is not written down is a dream that will never come true. And I believe that. I think that if you write down goals, then it keeps you focused on where you're wanting to go and what you need to do to get there. So in 2022, I said that I wanted to grow from 23 hives to somewhere in the 45 to 50 range. I wanted to establish a second bee yard. I wanted to make 1,500 pounds of honey. I really wanted a little bit more than that. I wanted my average closer to 100 pounds per hive, but I thought I'll be disappointed if I get less than 1,500 because you can't control the weather. So, you know, I can do a good job and still not have good results because the weather didn't cooperate. You can't control that. I also, I figured out in spring with the way the honey flow was going, I was going to have to move toward getting a permitted honey house put together. And I also wanted to start grafting and queen rearing. I needed to draw a bunch of comb. And a couple small things. I wanted to work bees without gloves. I wanted to move toward that. I wanted to get stung more this past year than I did in previous years so that I could start to build immunity and work toward working without gloves. And then I had some channel goals for this YouTube channel as well, and we'll talk about some of these. So let's go through the results. It all comes down to honey production for me because I'm not selling nukes or queens yet, you know, wax or pollen or any of that. Honey production is really my main income generator. And I look at honey production as a function of what is your winter dead loss rate, what is your swarm rate, and what does your nectar flow look like. And we'll go through it from that perspective. So winter dead loss. I went into winter last fall with 23 hives. I came out of winter with 23. So that's a 0% winter dead loss. That's the second year in a row that I've had a 0%, but you know, I'm working with larger numbers now and I'm putting smaller nukes into winter. So I'm expecting to start having some dead loss over winter. And you know, I look at this as an indicator that my management's been pretty successful, but it's not an absolute thing. You know, past results don't predict the future in all cases. So swarm season, that's the busy time of year, I tell you. So of the 23 hives I came out of winter with, I took one of those and stuck it into a horizontal hive made by Ricky Rourke. I've really enjoyed that hive, but putting it in the horizontal, I gave them a bunch of deep frames to draw. And in my mind, they kind of left my production units just because everything's not interchangeable anymore. You know, I'm running all mediums on my production hives. So I've enjoyed having that hive, but I don't count that as one of my production hives. I look at it as 22 hives. My swarm prevention strategy, I changed it this year. I started tipping boxes every week, looking for queen cups, and then to see if eggs were in those cups and to see if they were starting cells, look at the population, and just try to figure out, are these girls going to swarm before the main nectar flow hits? And here that main nectar flow is going to be black locust and tulip poplar that starts the last week in April to the first week in May. I had a bunch of hives that were moving too fast. So what I did with them is I implemented Rick Sutton's double queen system. I would split them with a double screen board and try to get the old queen in the top. I would allow the bottom part to have a lot of brood, and they could raise an emergency queen. So the bottom part would have all of the field bees, because any field bees in the top would go around to the front and be in that bottom part. It would slow them down because they'd have a brood break and they'd have to rear an emergency queen. In several cases, the top nuke with that existing queen got so strong that I pulled brood out of her hive and gave it to the bottom. And then right as the nectar flow was starting, I would take the old queen and put her in a small nuke and move her, and then combine those two and have this big, massive colony that went into the nectar flow. That strategy worked pretty well. I don't know that I'm going to use it this year. I think it'll be a tool in the toolbox, but it's not going to be my main tool, just because it got to be a lot of work to lift that nuke off and work the hive. And you know, you work hives from the back for a reason. You don't have all the field bees buzzing around you. But when I put the double screen on, I face it backwards, so I've got all the field bees from the nuke all around me while I'm trying to work in the bottom. It just got to be a lot of extra work to do that. But I did have pretty good success with it. I don't think I lost a queen on any of the ones that I did that to. And you know, some of them I split too late and we got into the nectar flow. I didn't know if they had an emergency queen in the bottom or not, so I just pulled the double screen and recombined the entire hive with the old queen in the top and whatever they were doing in the bottom. And even those didn't go queenless. I didn't lose any queens from doing that, so they sorted themselves out pretty well. So in the end, I think I had 4 hives out of the 22 that swarmed. And one of those was early enough in the year that, man, they swarmed like March 15th or March 17th or something, just ridiculously early. So I wasn't really looking for them to be swarming yet. So they surprised me. They got away from me. So that gives me an 18% swarm rate. That's a lot better than I did the previous year, but it's still not good. Good, I would say, would be 0 to 5%, maybe 8. Some of them are going to get away from you. Some of them will swarm when they're small. You can't prevent that. You just breed against it. So during swarm season, I either caught or trapped 12 swarms. The swarm season was not as bad this year as it was the previous year. Swarm trapping was not as good. I ran a trap line, and I've had swarm boxes, locations that have caught for 2 years in a row that didn't catch this past year. There just weren't as many swarms. I think a lot of wild hives may have not made it through winter, and that could be part of the reason. All right, so let's talk about nectar flow. We actually had pretty good weather for most of the season this past year. We had good weather for the early holly. We've got a Chinese holly around here. I've got one in my yard that the bees just love, and it blooms about 2 weeks before most everything else, or before the other hollies and the black locust and tulip poplar get started. Maples had pretty good weather. We actually got a decent black locust bloom this past year. It's pretty variable around here, and the weather can hurt those blooms very badly. They're really delicate. We had a good tulip poplar flow. It wasn't as good as the previous year, but it was good. Good enough. And then we had a strong persimmon flow. I've not seen a persimmon flow that good. Typically you don't, bees will forage persimmon, but they don't really make honey off of it. But I made several supers of persimmon honey, and I'm pleased to have it. It's very light in color and in flavor. It's got just a light floral, it's a very subtle floral taste, but it adds bulk and doesn't hurt quality at all. So I was glad to get it. Then later on in June, we had a good sumac flow. We had the best sourwood flow I've seen in several years. Trees that normally don't bloom were blooming. It seemed like all the sourwoods were blooming. So we actually made a little bit of sourwood honey, though I did not target it specifically as a varietal. So in the end, I made right around 2,100 pounds of honey, which is about a 95-pound average per hive. That's up from the 83-pound average I had the previous year. I'm pretty happy with that based on how much drawn comb I had to begin the year and how much comb I got drawn during the year. It takes more honey to draw comb than it does to make honey. And when you're drawing foundation, it eats up a lot of your honey production. So drawing comb was another goal that I had this past year. I started the year with right around 53 partially drawn supers, and I ended with 82 that were at least partially drawn. So That's pretty good, pretty good. A lot of honey production went into that. Like I said, it takes a lot of nectar to draw wax. So hive counts. I wanted to grow to the 45-50 range in 2 yards. And I went from 23 to somewhere around 44 before my summer and early fall queen attrition started. You always just have queens die, or they try to supersede and a mated queen never comes back, and then the hive dwindles. It'll eventually go to laying worker, and you just have queen attrition every year. You have to plan for that. So after queen attrition, I think I went back to somewhere around 38 hives, and that was not where I wanted to be. So I ended up getting some late mated queens. They were Michael Palmer queens, and I got 4 nukes started from them, so that put me back in the 42 range, and I'm okay with that. The honey house, I'm building a honey house from a 40-foot high cube shipping container that is moving along. I've been working a lot on that. It's taken a lot of weekends and free time. I've been working on it a lot, but it's getting to where it's usable now, and I'll get the walls and ceiling closed in soon, and I'll post an update video on that before I get the walls closed in, and go through that in detail. So cash flow. Last year I priced honey at $12 a pound and sold out quick. This year I bumped my price up to $14 a pound and offered a 35% wholesale discount to my retail customers. I've been working with right around 12 retailers. I added 3 or 4 this year, somewhere around there. And I would say of those, 5 or so are very high quality, and they reorder, they move volume, they're easy to work with. I'm trying to deepen my relationship with them, is what I'm saying there, by them being high quality. So as of right now, in the last week I put my last 4 buckets of honey into my bottling tank, and it holds 500 pounds. It's probably got about 450 in it. So I'd say I've sold about 1,650 pounds, somewhere around there. I think 950 of it has been wholesale. Somewhere around 650 is direct. And then I've given some away, and Christmas gifts and family and stuff. So, and I eat a lot. I eat a lot of honey in my Earl Grey tea. My wife says I need to cut back some, but I like it. So one of the top line numbers, big picture numbers that I look at is gross revenue per production colony. And what I'm expecting when everything is sold for this past year's production is somewhere around $950 in gross revenue per production colony that I started spring with. And I would say that that's quite good. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty good. Bottom line on cash flow, negative cash flow for 2022. I spent more than I brought in, but it's not on variable expenses like feed and gas and things like that. It's not on that stuff. It's on infrastructure. It was on woodenware and equipment and honey house. The honey house, I've put a lot of money into that, but that's something that is going into an asset that I can use for years, and it is also a legal hurdle. Here in Tennessee, if I produce more than 150 gallons of honey in a year, I've got to have a permit and be inspected by the state. So I'm over the limit this past year, and I've got to move toward getting that permit in order to be legal. I don't mind infrastructure spending or capital expenditure when it's stuff that I'm going to be able to use for a long time. Marketing, I'll talk a little bit about that. I get some questions on this. So selling direct versus wholesale, I prefer selling direct because I get a 35% increase in the price, but wholesale does some things for me. I'm setting a minimum order quantity for wholesale customers at $250, unless they're in town and I pass by them to go pick my kids up from school or whatever. If I have to drive to deliver honey somewhere, it's a $250 minimum order quantity. And that does a few things for me. It makes it so that I don't mind doing free delivery for them, because it's a big enough order that I'm happy to do it. But it also sort of weeds out some of the retailers that can't move volume. And I'm really looking for the ones that can move volume. You know, I'll work with them for a year or so and try to get a customer base that is used to going there to buy my honey. But if they can't reorder, then I'm not going to pursue them too far into the future. I'm looking to move some volume and deepen relationships with my high quality retailers. So that minimum order sort of weeds that out. How I'm finding those retailers, I just contact them directly. You know, I look for stores that I would love to sell my honey in, email them, call them, stop by with a sample jar, that sort of thing. It's not that hard. If you've got a package that looks good and you know what you're talking about, it's not hard to sell to retailers. You know, if your stuff moves quickly, if it turns and has a good enough margin for them, they'll be happy to talk to you. They really will. So I did go to one festival this year and sold directly. It far exceeded what I thought we were going to do. My wife told me I needed to bring more honey on the first day, and I told her there's no way we're going to sell this much. I don't want to carry that much and have to unload it and then put it back in the truck at the end of the day and take it home. And she was right. We just nearly sold out on the first day, and that means that we lost sales, because you sell more from a full table than you do from an almost empty table. People feel like they've got options, and there's this psychological thing. They don't want to take your last bottle, you know. So we lost some sales on the first day. The second day was a half day, and we did well there. We ended up selling about 315 pounds in a day and a half on one October weekend. So I had gotten a really nice canopy tent that's branded and has local honey on it. Looks really good. And that thing was expensive, and we were able to pay for that, plus all the decorative things my wife got and everything with the sales from the first year. So I was really happy with that, because now I've got that asset that I feel like is, you know, paid for, and I can use it for years and years. So that's something I'll probably do more of in the future. I may be careful about where I go, because I don't have a lot of time. You know, I've got a full-time job, 2 young kids, and I'm busy. So next thing on marketing is website. Last year I threw up a website through WordPress, and I've not used WordPress in a lot of years, so it was a learning curve for me to get back into it. But I got one up, and it was okay, you know. This year, I didn't set this goal until late in the year, and I was thinking about making this video, and I really wanted to have a better website before I made this video. So I went ahead and bit the bullet and moved my site over to an e-com platform. It's on BigCommerce. That's something I've used with my work for several years, so I'm pretty familiar with it. Just know where stuff is and how to do things in it. So it seemed like a natural fit for me. So I am selling honey through my website now. Just got that started, so I'm sure there will be some bugs, but I'm selling honey there. and I'm happy with it where it is. The blog is not as good. I'd like to write more articles and stuff, and their blog format is not very good at all. So I don't know, I may move it to a subdomain. I haven't decided yet. So administrative stuff, this may help somebody. I've got a separate bank account for the beekeeping business. My tax guy told me that I need to do that. You need to have separate accounts, separate credit card, that sort of stuff. That way if you ever get audited, they're going to know you're not commingling funds. And I don't know, I trust his judgment, so I did that. And I went to QuickBooks this year, so I'm tracking transactions and categorizing and all that tedious stuff. I think this year at tax time will be easier because I did that, but I didn't do it at the beginning of the year. So next year, hopefully I'll be in shape and all that stuff will be more seamless than it has been in the past. So let's talk about failures that I had during the year. The swarm prevention strategy that I had was a lot of work. The result was okay at best, but I learned a ton. So doing those weekly box tips, I could see the progression, and I could look at a colony and figure out they're going to swarm before the nectar flow. And being able to do that, being able to look at a colony, see the population, see how much brood is in there, and make a determination on whether they're going to swarm before the nectar flow hits or not, is going to allow me to move into some other swarm prevention strategies in the future. And that namely would be equalizing colonies within a bee yard, which would be taking brood from colonies that are too big and giving it to colonies that are too small, and trying to even out the populations within all the hives so they get into the nectar flow without swarming. You need to have the art part of beekeeping down to be able to make those judgment calls on who's too big, who's too small. And I learned a lot about that this year. The good thing about equalizing is it allows you to manage more colonies without crises. So, you know, it's a big, slow ship moving on the ocean, not a little boat that's going choppy over the waves and stuff. You don't have these spikes, these hives that surprise you and all this. It's a lot more predictable. You can set your workload. It just allows you to run more colonies with the same or less work than some other methods. So another failure that I had, I didn't do any queen rearing. I didn't do any nukes, other than just normal stuff. You know, I would find some swarm cells and start a small nuke just to try to get extra mated queens. But I had this idea that I could make a bunch of queens after the solstice, which is somewhere around June 20, and make nukes and get them into a single medium, and then winter them over a double screen board on top of a big colony. And then I would have nukes in the spring to either increase my own hive counts and turn into production colonies, or I would have overwintered nukes that I could sell early in the season at a premium. And those summer queens made after the solstice will be less likely to swarm than, you know, other queens would be, like a 2-year-old queen. So that was my idea, and I was getting geared up to do that. And my mom passed on June 16th, unexpectedly. And man, that just changed everything. You know, I pulled the reins in on everything I was doing. Just basically shut it down to the bare minimum. I had to get honey off hives and extract, and, you know, had to do some things, but anything that was extra or ambitious, it just didn't get done. And that's just how it's been. So I didn't make as many nukes as I intended. I didn't do queen rearing. I actually have two hives that got infested with wax moth. I've not had that before. You know, these were in the early fall, and one of them was queen right. It had a had a queen in there that had eggs, but she was failing and the colony was dwindling, and wax moth started creeping in from the outsides, and you know, that hive was almost a complete loss. And then the other hive I got on quick enough, I lost some frames but was able to save most of it. But I think it was just a bad year for wax moth, and you know, that's why that happened. So working without gloves, I'm not. I have some, but I'm not there yet. I did get stung a lot more this year. Started wearing just a bee jacket with thin pants a lot of times, and they'll sting me through the pants, and it doesn't bother me at all. Getting stung in the arms or shoulders or almost anywhere doesn't bother me that much. But if I get stung in the backs of the hands, it makes my knuckles swell up for a couple of days still. So that's something I'm still working on. I am just using regular work gloves, not the big gauntlets most of the time. So I'll get stung on the wrists some because those aren't covered. But I don't know. That's something I'd like to work toward, especially if I start working with queens more, you know, picking queens up, marking them, and doing stuff like that. I'd like to work gloveless. But I also don't like having wax and propolis and honey and sticky stuff all over my hands when I get in the truck and get that on the steering wheel. So I don't know. We'll just see how that goes. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how the season went. I think I accomplished most of what I set out to do. I was very blessed in my honey production. It feels like a year that I've survived. It's been a tough year, you know, losing my mom, and then we had some close friends that lost their 4-year-old son a couple weeks before I lost my mom, and just a lot of people I know have lost loved ones this year. It's been tough, but God is good and has blessed us, and we'll get through it. So from an operational standpoint, I feel like, you know, 40, 42 hives and getting a honey house. This next year, I'm hoping I'm going to get over the hump where I'll actually have positive cash flow. I've got an operation that can be profitable while still being manageable from a workload perspective. I think I've got most of the tools in place that I need to manage this operation the way that I want to. And I'm just looking forward to it. Looking forward to 2023. So next year, I'm planning on expanding again. I may end up somewhere in the 60 to 80 hive range. We'll see how the workload goes. I want to establish at least 2 more out yards, and these will be around my home yard within a mile and a half. And I plan to use them as drone flooding yards so I can start to better control my genetics on virgin queens. Queen breeding and rearing and selling is something that I would like to get into in the future, and I need to get this done so that I can control my genetics. I also want to get my honey house permitted, hope preferably in early spring. I intend to start grafting and queen rearing next year. Want to expand my honey production with the amount of comb I need to draw again. You know, if I get in the 90-pound range, I think I'll be pretty happy with that. The state average in Tennessee is about 60 per colony, so you know, I think somewhere in that 90-pound range would be a good goal to shoot for with how much comb I need to get drawn. I'd really like to get into the positive cash flow category next year. That would be really nice. I think most of my big infrastructure spending will be over and done with. So if we have a decent nectar flow and things go well, you know, just average well, just as long as they're not bad, then I think I can get there pretty comfortably. Well, guys, I hope that this has been helpful. I'll be very clear, the reason that I do this is not to toot my own horn, so to speak. I'm a private person. This stuff's hard for me to talk about. It really is hard for me to talk about this stuff, but I'm hoping that someone can learn something from it, and maybe, I don't know, maybe inspire somebody to do something that they don't think they can do or don't know if they can do it. You know, try Beekeeping's a fun hobby. It's a hobby that can make money. It can break even. It can make a little bit of money, and you can turn it into a business if you have the energy and the knowledge and the work ethic and all that stuff. So I'm hoping that this helps. If you guys have got any questions, ask in the comments. I respond to almost every comment that you guys post. Guys, I appreciate you watching. I'm going to show you the river over here as we close and play some music for you. It is absolutely gorgeous right now. I love it down here.